Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me on a fairly windy afternoon here in Miami, Florida, today for my first drive in this, the new Cadillac CT5-V Blackwing. Now it's been a few years since I last drove a Cadillac, about 5 years ago in the CTS-V, but this is a pretty good way to return. Now the CT5 is the equivalent of say a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes E-Class. The V Series cars have always been dialed up a notch or two, but this is the Blackwing. The engine in here is one I'm familiar with. It's the 6.2 litre supercharged V8 that you find in the likes of the C7 Corvette Z06 or the Camaro ZL1. And in the case of this, we also happen to have a 6-speed manual transmission. Yes, 668 brake horsepower with 3 pedals and a manual gear shift. We're going to take a full look at the car today, go through the exterior, the details, all about it, check out the interior in full as well, before taking it for a drive to see what this is all about. Today, my first drive in the new Cadillac CT5-V Blackwing. Let's get started with a walk around to find out all of the details then about the new Cadillac CT5-V Blackwing. We'll take a look around the exterior before checking out the interior, taking a look at the engine bay, and crucially finding out what it's like to drive, particularly in this car with the 6-speed manual. Now they aren't available in the UK, so I've got a lot to learn very fast, but being a Brit, I do have to comment on the weather. It is what we do, and it is unusually overcast and windy here in Miami today, but nonetheless, that is not going to stop the fun. So as I said, the last Cadillac that I drove was the CTS-V, which in many ways was the predecessor to this car. They've also recently launched the CT4-V Blackwing, which is a smaller car with a twin-turbo V6, but this is the big, bad, sporty, angry beast, you could say. 668 horsepower with a manual gearbox, which I think makes it one of the most powerful manuals I've ever driven outside of hypercars, really. The Koenigsegg's, Pagani's, perhaps the Roof's, different modified cars along the way as well. But this is going to be quite something. Rear-wheel drive, long wheelbase, a lot of power and a lot of torque. Now in terms of the design, I think it looks sharp, and this colour out here in the sunshine, the infrared, is a lovely looking thing. It is a top spec car that we're looking at, although the prices for these start at about $85,000 US dollars. This car as spec is $114,000, but that is significantly cheaper than say its equivalent BMW M5 CS, something along those lines. Looking around the exterior, you have those vertical running lights down below the headlights. You've got some carbon fiber trim around the front grille, same for the splitter. You've got sharp lines pretty much wherever you look, but perhaps a fairly subtle view to the untrained eye. You've got that V Series logo worn on the side. You've got the dual tone finish on the large wheels with the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres. We've got a carbon lip spoiler over the boot lid, the tail lights that mimic the design from the front but carry this crease that goes all the way along the shoulder line down towards the bumper as well. Back here, more carbon fibre for the diffuser, the quad tailpipes, twin on each side for the V8, which do sound oh so good, as we're going to be hearing plenty of very shortly. But to many, this might just look like a normal sporty coupe 5-door car, let's say 4-door car with that kind of hatch rear end, but overall nothing too dramatic until you're out driving it. So let's come and have a look at the interior for a moment and see what we've got here with the Sky Cool grey and black dual tone finish. We've got all the lovely carbon fibre inlays and trims. You've got the red contrast stitching, the red piping around the seats, these embroideries. I do think it looks very, very nice in here. And of course, you've got a 6-speed manual, you've got a clutch pedal, something that we don't see all that much of in the current era. So let's take a step on board and get this started. Clutch in. Yes, now that's a familiar sound, I'm not going to lie. From driving in the Z06 or the Z06 of the previous generation and the ZL1, I do know the sound of this V8, and it sounds oh so good. So I'm looking forward to getting this out on the road and sharing more of what that's about. I do think that this central infotainment is perhaps a little bit dated by many modern standards. We can touch more on that and run through all of the details of this a little bit later, but before we do go anywhere, I'd like to show you in the engine bay itself. So give a pull of the lever just down there. Let's come round, take a look at this. Well, we've got this gigantic 6.2 litre lump running away here. The engine that we know, the LT4, 6.2 litres, supercharged, 8-cylinder, making in this case 677 metric horsepower, 668 brake horsepower, 659 pounds-foot of torque. That's 893 newton meters, all going through the manual or auto box, whichever you choose for, to the rear wheels. That's a good combination. This is one of the last of this kind of thing, and in fact Cadillac have said that it is the last non-E assisted equivalent of this that they will make, the last purely combustion engine vehicle of this type. It's a special, special thing. So let's hop on board then. Let's go take it for a first drive and see what this is actually like. Let us get on the move, and I'll show you later what these seats look like from behind. They are the upgraded, or the optional seat with the carbon fiber back, and they look insane. Now, when it comes to the shifter, to put this car into gear takes a fair bit of work. There's a short throw, it feels fantastic, but expect it to be a proper drive when you take it out. Anyway, we're in completely normal at the moment, into first gear. Let's head out from this car park and go for a little drive. We are in Miami, so I must say, not exactly the world's most exciting roads around us. I'd love to take it to, you know, Daytona or Homestead or something fun, and that's no doubt where this car could be pretty epic. But driving like this, you know, in normal, it's fairly quiet, it's fairly calm. Shifted up into second, pretty unusual for me to drive a manual left-hand drive car, not something I've spent an awful lot of time doing. All of my left-hand drive cars are paddle shift, auto, dual clutch, whichever it might be. But in here, you know, it's fairly comfortable. It's an M5 equivalent. You know, it's the kind of car that you can use for every purpose, to go to business meetings or to hoon around on a mountain pass. Now, it's not exactly the lightest thing in the world. It is 4,100 pounds, which is about 1,870 kilos. We'll see whether it manages to do a decent job of disguising some of that. But on the power, and you start to hear an engine sound that is more familiar in a Corvette than it is in a big saloon car, and this is the quieter mode. So obviously the valves are basically closed. If we go to the center here, you've got the driving modes, and you can set your own configurable mode. You can put it into track or into sport or into snow or into ice. You've got a button for rev matching if you don't want to do it yourself. You can just blip the car, the dashboard goes yellow to let you know that's the setting you've got enabled, and there are a whole lot of burbles and crackles going on behind. But this is really nicely positioned. It feels great. Like I said, it does require a little bit of work on the clutch. It's a pretty stiff, heavy clutch feel. I haven't yet been able to try the brakes. They're optional carbon ceramics that you can have for the car, obviously helping with some of that weight. But you've got a digital display in front of you, pretty much the norm now. You've got, by most standards, a fairly small central screen. The font sizes are quite large. Most cars, I think, these days have kind of moved to the next generation from this. Perhaps feels like a step back, as I said. You've got a V button on the steering wheel, which will allow you to hop straight into your V series modes, your V modes, where in here you can directly configure these exactly how you want. You press on the screen and then slide them around and confirm various things. You have the steering through a few different settings: suspension, engine and shifting. The brake feel, like in the M5, you can adjust the feel of the brake pedal. You've got the engine sound, and you've got the PTM. Now, you also have the PDR in here, so you've got the data recorder if you want to go to that. Like in the Corvette, so you can record your telemetry and data of what the car is up to. You've got all of the safety systems, functionality, assistance, things that you'd probably expect to find in a car of this nature, obviously, which make life quite pleasant from a daily driving point of view. There's a lot of space. As I said, it's a touch smaller than the M5. To use my measurements, it's about 7 centimeters shorter, so what's that, about 3 inches, and about 13 centimeters longer than an M3, which is about 5 or 6 inches. So sitting somewhere, I guess, in the middle of that range. Unfortunately, it does look like we have a little bit of traffic, which is not what anybody would really like when driving in a car like this, but we'll find our way hopefully to something a little bit more open and flowing to just enjoy. But the seating position is good. In typical American style, very, very, very small door mirrors. That's something I noticed with American cars versus European counterparts. European cars always have to have much bigger door mirrors, so you can't see all that much in them comparatively. It just feels like maybe the dashboard and interior is, you know, just a generation back, except we do have wireless charging for the phone. We do have some nice storage buckets and cubby holes and things, and obviously we've got cool ventilated seats, heated seats. You've got an electric button for the park brake over on this side. But it's the kind of car that if you want to play with this toggle on the steering wheel, which is your performance traction toggle, you can just turn it through a few different modes: wet, dry, sport, race 1 or race 2. Turn it through the modes, and if you were to apply a lot of power, you know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to leave some very black lines on the tarmac, some 11s if you're in a straight line, or a nice little circle if you've got the wheel at an angle, which is very, very fun and something we do not see so much in the modern era. So what do you think about this amount of power? That's actually interesting. I just got the head-up display giving me a collision warning system pop up, and it's very bright, and it vibrates the seat as well. So the seat has these vibration sensors which link to the security systems. I think it's a little bit over the top. It loves to tell you about things that aren't really a problem, like we just had. I was certainly not about to go into the car in front of me just then, but it let me know anyway. But I guess that's, you know, assistance things that just make life that little bit more pleasant. That's ultimately what they're there for. Anyway, let's get out of the city of Sunny Isles Beach, where it's a bit of a jam, and try and find something where we can open it up a touch more. This just has that bit of old school that you don't really get anymore, which I think makes it, or sets it apart pretty much from anything else out there. And, you know, driving at the moment in sport, you know, we're not in full track or race modes, but we do have the rev matching on. You've just got this constant V8 sound, a sound that is so familiar from the Z06. Just everything about it, the way it shifts. I've driven a manual Z06 C7 before, and having that sound in this is quite unusual and taking a little bit of getting used to. I'm not gonna lie, it just doesn't necessarily feel right, but those downshifts are cool. A small bit of corner. Steering feels, I mean, decently weighted. You can turn it up, obviously, and make it heavier than it is at the moment. But then out onto a more open road, the torque, there's so much torque. Like 900 Newton meters is a big number, 659 pounds a foot. In second gear, yeah, it's pretty quick, and I know it will carry that up through the rev range. You get to about 6,500 RPM. In fact, the road is going to open up a little bit more in front of us. Listen to this. And you can flat shift it, by the way. Wow. Unfortunately, more traffic though. Oh dear, that's not gone very well at all. Flat shifting in first. Okay. This thing's a little bit mad. Maybe I should notch it down just a touch. It's quite lively. It gets your heart racing. That's for sure. Unfortunately for me, being here in Miami, not only do we have fairly boring roads, let's be honest, but they're also super congested today. It's the afternoon. I guess everybody's out and about. Not too much I can do about that, but either way, the thing with a car like this is it's just fun regardless. You know, I think that's the main thing behind it, right? Now, you can't exactly flat shift straight into traffic in front of you, but when you do it, it certainly gets your heart racing. As there's a bright orange Urus on the other side. There are so many Lamborghini Uruses around this area, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, just a little bit frustrating not being able to unleash it as much as I would perhaps like. Do we have a hill hold? Not initially. Let's use the clutch and do it myself. Might be some options for that. There are things you can change, by the way. There is a button to change the collision gap adjust. I've found that on the steering wheel, thankfully. So that means it's no longer popping up every 5 seconds, which is a delight. Much more what I would like. And then you've got your usual controls to go through trips and different settings, and your cruise control, your, you know, the usual things that you have around. Yeah, just hopefully we can flow somewhere at some point, because I would quite like to enjoy this a little bit more if we possibly can. Even just in first gear there. So if I pop it up with the driving modes, we are currently in traction race 1. Okay, so you have those controls all independently. There's a lot to learn. It's one of the things. If you turn off performance traction, then you have the driving modes controlled separately. My mode, track, sport, and tour is your standard mode. And you actually get the graphic here on the central screen that shows you exactly what each of those are doing with the settings. So track is pretty much everything dialed up to the max, whereas sport just pulls it all down a notch. And then when you're in track is your performance traction management, your PTM. There we go. I just like playing, I like having all the settings, being able to try it all. And when I accelerate in first gear, when the light changes, and we try to flat shift into second, it's going to be quite exciting. So let's just keep performance traction in dry. Everything's set up. Okay, yes, I think. Rev matching still on. You can do it yourself, but I'm just going to keep it this way. So when we go, let's see what happens. And we have a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. There are lots of Cullinans, G-Wagons, Bentegas, all of the luxury SUVs. Right, green light, so into first gear. Let's go. Foot flat on the throttle, clutch in, into second, and yes, it's a bit crazy. Well, it does what it's supposed to do. It's just a bit of a mind fiddle to work out exactly how to do it, what it's doing, how it works. And yeah, quite good fun. Down to second, down to first, and take it easy. You have to wonder though, when you're driving around town or wherever you are, do you want a manual or do you want an automatic? I always feel that for a bit of fun, for a one-time outing, for just enjoying the car, it's always going to be a manual. But in the real world, when you find yourself sitting in traffic jams like this, do you really want to be clutching in and out and shifting gears? And not normally. So you can see how these things have unfortunately declined in their popularity. I just love the fact that they still offer it. You know, you can get a manual M3, regular M3, not M3 competition. You certainly can't get a manual M5. You can't get a manual anything top end from AMG or anything from AMG at all, basically. So to have this option in a world of these things basically, unfortunately, falling into no further existence is quite the delight overall. Just to be engaged with it, to be connected with it, to be able to drive the car properly. And I think it's just an absolute laugh. It's like why I have my GT500, you know, a car like this costs less money, offers you massive smiles. Yes, okay, it's not necessarily considering the same things overall. It's about power, it's about numbers, it's about excitement, much more than, you know, the latest tech feel in here, as I said, and we'll go through all of this a bit more shortly. But for driving around, this is just hilarious fun. It's just a lot of fun. Puts a massive smile on the face. A last final open stretch, so let's give this another go. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. The sound and feel of this thing on a nice open 55 mile per hour road. Listen to this, 4,500 RPM. What a beast, what an absolute brute. I mean, that's what it's for, and it does it so well. So, when it comes to putting a smile, as I said, that's where this car excels. When it comes to chilling out, you'd probably want something a little bit more subtle with an auto box. Just over here. Yeah, I should go as fast as that guy. We'd have even more fun. Wow, okay. Good times. As promised, let's have a better look around the interior and also check out the rear so I can show you more of these seats. But firstly, we need to hear a bit more of this. A warm engine in track mode. You have the prominent central rev counter just there. Check this out. Of course, we have that soft limiter, but it sounds so good for a big car like this. We also obviously have the speedo just here, some trip information over to the right. You can go through various different screens with that, the performance timer, driver assistance, and then your audio nav and the phone and those kind of things as well. And plenty of settings and various things that you can change depending how you'd like to have all of that set up. This is where you have your traction control. So this toggle, as I showed when driving, is which you slide up through inactive to wet, to dry, to sport, to race 1, to race 2. And obviously that's basically where it's fully off, and you've got all of those settings for that independently of your V modes and your other driving modes, which are through the toggles just here, bringing up that display on the central screen where you can then configure and change all of that. You've got your rev match button, your traction button, the traditional way just here. Now, I want to touch a little bit more on this. Most of the materials in here are quite nice, the leather steering wheel, the carbon inlays, the stitching, all of the finishing elements. But this to me feels a bit old school. It's nice to have the wireless charging pad, phone is low, so that's just plugged in at the moment. But you know, here where you've got your heated and cooled seats, it's all just a little plasticky, and this feels a bit old school. Something about it, maybe just having this painted in a different color, or if this was carbon trim or even body color painted, that might look quite nice as well. You've got the hard button there to go back to home and a few toggles to go through some settings and things. Also, the shifter does feel really good. Top marks for that, because at the end of the day, this is a car to drive. Obviously, I'm used to doing it left-handed, but it just feels nice, and that's so important all the way over to the right and forwards to go into reverse, where you have a great rear view camera, and obviously some assistance and different things around that as well. We also have this storage tray which nicely fits the key, and the key, by the way, to show you, is this very lovely red example. Looks quite nice, and that fits in there. You've got the armrest, some storage in there, and some USB ports, and your usual things that you might like to have. Let's press the button, just turn it off for the moment, and the rev counter kind of fades away. The park brake is that button. Are we on? Yes, it's on at the moment. And a few other controls, your head-up display, info, brightness and things here. Hard button there to open the boot up, memory seat controls, mirrors, window switches and the like. But I do want to come and show you in the rear. I've talked about this enough, because check out these seats. They look awesome. The full carbon fiber backed seats that you have up front, very, very slender as a result. They have these openings up here, the V badge there as well. They look really, really nice, and the rear is finished to a high quality also. These nice stitching, center lines and different features. Looks good, and as you can see from the seat in my position, there is a lot of space back here. A lot of space, it has to be said. I think more space than the M5 has, even though it's a slightly shorter car. It does have this sloping roof, which slightly impacts headroom up top, but I can sit back here fine, and so I'm not complaining. And you can see how we've got these two different panels for the sunroofs, which are currently closed up, but you could have those open should you wish. We've got the AKG sound system. There is actually one more sound option above this. One thing I find quite strange, by the way, this is, I presume, Cadillacs in general that I'm not familiar with. Oh, keys inside. To open the door, it's not a physical handle that you pull. There's basically a button on the back. You press and it pops it open. So it's quite a different operation to get familiar with. I should probably grab that, pop it back in my pocket when you are familiar with it. It's a non-issue, of course. Let's come around to the boot. After all, we have boot, trunk, you know what we're talking about. Lots of space back here, as you expect, as you need from this kind of thing. It's not a power fold tailgate though. You do have to do it manually. I mean, not too much of a hardship, but it is quite awkward. If you do this aggressively, you catch your knuckles in it. You need to kind of try and catch it, which is a small thing, but hey, it's often about the small things when it comes to these kind of cars. So what you get with this is a lot of car for your money, a wild thing, a crazy fun thing, an enjoyable drive, maybe not necessarily the same premium quality, fit, finish and feel as you might find with some of the German equivalents, but it's a very, very good piece of kit for the money. I really do think so. I've enjoyed driving it an awful lot today. I'm sorry if it's quite windy now that I've stepped back out. Thankfully a little bit calmer than it was earlier, and yeah, just had a good time. So driving the Cadillac CT5-V Blackwing out here in Miami. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. That is it for this time though, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.